In this video we're going to have a look at cell structure, and we're going to look at what you'll find in each type of cell: animal cells, plant cells, bacteria and yeast cells. Now really I should have put yeast cells with the animal and plant cells because they got more in common with them than they do with bacteria, but however we'll press ahead. This video is a bit of a beast, there's a lot in it, so don't be afraid to pause if you want to take a break halfway through. There is a kitten at the end though, so that should help. Okay, here we go. Okay, to start us off, here's some picture of cake. Here's a kind of tasty wedding cake. It's got a few layers in, a bit of white icing and some sort of dollopy thing on top. Here's some delicious looking chocolate strawberry cheesecake. There's a couple of kind of raspberry things or strawberries or whatever to kind of make it look a bit healthier than it is. Somebody's made this fairly awesome teddy bear cake surrounded by little bees. And someone's made a pretty naff kind of cat cake thing. It's got spaghetti or something sticking in it, a bit rubbish. But anyway, what cake will do is it will make you fat. Here's a picture of a fat man in a boat. I think he's eating some cake. Now, if you look, he's going to sink because he's pretty fat, because the cake has a lot of fat in. But of course, this picture is a bit wrong because fat and water don't really mix. If you ever try a few drops of oil or fat in water and shake it up, they'll just form little droplets and it'll eventually settle back into separate layers. At this point, you're probably wondering why am I talking about cake and fat? Well, fats are another type of molecule you need to know about in biology, and they're another type of molecule you get in your diet. We don't really call them fats in science, though we call them a lipid. Now, a lipid, or a fat, is hydrophobic. Now, the hydro bit means water. The the phobia bit means that you're afraid of something. So if a lipid is hydrophobic, it means it's afraid of water. Just like some people have a coulrophobia, a fear of clowns. And just like the hydrophobic part of the lipid doesn't really want to mix with water, you probably don't want to mix with a clown. He'll eat your face off. Look at him there. What cells do, though, is they attach something else onto this kind of lipid. And they attach a phosphate group, just another molecule, but these phosphate groups are hydrophilic. So again, the hydro bit means water, but the philic part this time means that they like something. So a phosphate group is hydrophilic, and it means that it likes the water. For example, if you were cakeophilic, it means you like cake. Again, there's this awesome bear cake. Doesn't that look awesome? Look at all the little bees. There's loads of them. Brilliant. I like cake. I don't like cat cake though. Cat cake is pants. Go away, cat cake. No one wants it here. So when you've got a lipid with a phosphate group attached to it, we call it a phospholipid. A key point to remember here is that the head part, the phosphate group, likes the water. The lipid part, the tail end of it, doesn't like the water. Well, if you were to put a phospholipid on top of some water, the hydrophobic part will stand up. The bit that doesn't like water, the tail bit, will kind of stand up, whereas the hydrophilic part, the head, will kind of point towards the water. And if you put a whole load of phospholipids onto water, they'll do that. They form a little skin on top with the hydrophobic parts pointing away. If you were to submerge this phospholipid sheet underwater, it'd form up into a kind of a spherical ball formation like here, where you've got we've got the hydrophobic tail bits in the middle and the hydrophilic head bits towards the outside, which means you've got no water in the middle, but water on the outside. Now, cells use this property of phospholipids in a very clever way. They get them to line up into what's called a bilayer. We've got two rows of them lined up, and here you can see that the hydrophilic parts, the hydrophilic head parts, are near the water, and the hydrophobic tail parts have no water in between them. A very useful property, and I'll explain how they use it now. Okay, we're going to have a look at a typical animal cell. Now, when I say typical, this is a generalized animal cell. It's just what most animal cells, the kind of features that most of them will have. Obviously, as you know, many cells are specialized and won't look anything like this at all, but they will have these common features. Okay, so the most part of an animal cell, and in fact of all living cells, is going to be made up of cytoplasm. Now, cytoplasm is the kind of goo that's inside the cells. There's a better word for it than goo, but it's mostly water, and it provides a place where the cell's chemical reactions can happen. It also provides a place where the cell can put its organelles. And when I say organelles, those are the other bits of the cell, like the nucleus, the vacuoles and stuff like that. Now, if the cytoplasm was just kind of there on its own, the cell would have a lot of trouble controlling what goes into and out of it. Instead, the cell surrounds itself with a lining of this phospholipid. It goes around the outside of the cell. And you've got the cytoplasm on one side of the bio, and on the other side you've got the outside of the cell. So instantly you've got a separation from what's inside the cell from what's outside, and the cell can control what goes through it. So this phospholipid bilayer surrounds the cell, and it's the cell membrane, and the cell membrane controls what goes into the cell and what comes out of it. While it may look like a giraffe has just had a poo on my diagram, this is meant to be a protein. So the cells control what goes through the cell membrane by having proteins that go through it, and they can carry some substances into the cell and some substances out, depending on which protein is where. Moving on a bit, you're probably familiar with the nucleus. The nucleus works as the control center of the cell, and it's made up of a lot of DNA. For most of its life cycle inside the cell, the DNA is just kind of coiled together like a big pile of spaghetti. It's called chromatin. In animal, plant, and fungal cells, the nucleus has its own membrane around it that separates it from the rest of the cytoplasm. And again, it will have gaps in. It'll have little pores in for letting some stuff through in and out. Okay, these little blue blobs, I've done them to represent mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria, we'll be going into respiration later on, but for now, the mitochondria are where most of the cell's respiration is carried out. And if we zoom in a little on the mitochondria, it's got a quite specific structure. It's got an outer membrane that surrounds it, and it's got an inner membrane as well. The inner membrane is folded in and out, kind of like if you were to fold a load of cloth in and out. These little foldings are called cristae, and they increase the surface area across which respiration can happen. Finally, animal cells also have ribosomes. Ribosomes help the cell to synthesize protein. They help it to make protein. They act under instructions from the nucleus. The nucleus kind of starts the process off, but ribosomes finish making the proteins.